What's going on, you PoE lovers? Today, I'm going to show you a powerful build which you should try in less than a divine or 3. Introducing the Ailment Stacking Invoker. This fast-hitting machine can shatter entire packs of monsters while at the same time vanquish most bosses in seconds. We achieve this with 4 ailments, namely Shock, Chill, Ignite, and Freeze. Each of these stack individually with the Tempest Bell, enabling us to deal massive amounts of elemental damage to single targets. Defensively, the build can easily run T14 and higher maps without dying, and that is unless you step inside multiple on death effects at the same time. We are able to evade both attack and spell hits at a reasonable rate with the help of Wind Dancer and Acrobatics. I will explain how you scale further more into your defenses soon. But most importantly, you need to know how this works. Our build heavily relies on power charges to activate the charged staff. This skill can destroy anything in your way, as if you are playing a short-ranged character. In my opinion, there is no monk build without charged staff. So far, this is the best skill in the monk class, and is absolute fun to play with it. So the way how we get power charges is by generating frenzy charges via the Combat Frenzy skill. And then make sure to grab the Resonance Keystone in your passive tree, which basically turns your frenzy charges into power charges. But Combat Frenzy can only generate charges if you freeze or electrocute a target. So one option is to use the Electrocute gem on Tempest Flurry at the cost of a useful socket. You then electrocute monsters with lightning damage to gain charges for this. But the problem is, you lose a ton of damage from the shock effect, which you otherwise have to rely on your Herald skills to shock. Alternatively, if you don't have enough cold damage in your build, you can hit the target with Tempest Flurry, then you drop the bell. And when you hit 1 or 2 times, this counts as a target being frozen, thus generating a power charge. You can get 5% of your total damage as extra cold from the passive tree, and another 10% from the ascendancy point. Having additional cold damage in your weapon and rings will get you power charges when you hit an enemy with Tempest Flurry. The third option is to use the 3 Dragons Helmet, which turns your shocks into freeze build-up. But once you get enough flat damage of each type in your gear, you should gain the charges when you hit an enemy. Now, how do we get these chain explosions? There are 2 ways to do this. With 1 divine, you can just put this ring, and it treats chilled monsters as frozen, which causes your Herald device to chain explode nearby enemies you kill. I was lucky to get this ring from the ground, but if you are not, this setup should do the same thing. A lot of people use different setups, but I took the counsel of some of the best players in the ladder to choose these supports. The gist of it is basically we shock with Herald device, and at the same time, we also freeze with Herald of Thunder. This causes the chain explosions nearly as effective as the unique ring. You then stack as much cold damage to shatter the targets. You can use both of this setup in case you lack cold damage in your build. Combat Frenzy should always come with Profusion to sometimes get 2 charges instead of 1. Precision is optional if you have extra spirit. By time you get to the end game, you will have to stack Evasion and Energy Shield. So make sure you get Ghost Dance, Grim Feast, and Wind Dancer set up ready. In case if they nerf Grim Feast, you can take Meditate as your 3rd or final ascendancy point. It basically provides double Energy Shield to you. Wind Dancer is like a lesser version of Grace from PoE 1. If you are wondering how we get 50% evasion despite acrobatics, this is why. Without acrobatics, this would be a whopping 80%. So make sure to get as much evasion and energy shield from your gear instead of life. If you manage to get up to a 4k energy shield, you can take Chaos Inoculation and completely forget about life and Chaos res from your items. If you take CI, then all the stun and ailment threshold will depend on your ES instead of life. But if you are like me with very little life, then you will need a Stone Charm for stun recovery and a Thawing Charm for freeze immunity. You can get an additional charm slot by anointing your amulet with Hunter's Talisman, which is 3 Distilled Paranoia. This mitigation is extremely important. Stun and freeze are very difficult to manage in PoE 2. Otherwise, you will have to do the Quinn strat, which is basically pause and exit whenever you get stunned or frozen. For our main set of skills, we are using Tempest Flurry, which we use to proc the Charged Staff. Both scales separately, although Charged Staff is considered a buff effect. Although damage from Charged Staff is smaller than Tempest Flurry, the thing that makes it so good is the range, speed, and the added damage. This combined with the Heralds make this the meat and butter of this build. Now the part which further takes damage to the moon is, when you throw the Tempest Bell on top of the boss or a tanky rare monster, each of your damage types, namely Fire, Cold and Lightning, applies shockwaves separately dealing massive amounts of elemental damage at the target. So make sure to aim at the boss location and hit the bell with Tempest Flurry that is empowered by Charged Staff. And since we are applying the ailments directly on our target, we can throw all the damage gems into the Tempest Bell at the cost of not applying ailments from it. This is why we are able to annihilate endgame bosses on a budget gear setup. By stacking all 3 elemental damage types on your gear starting with the weapon, we can achieve much higher damage potential than expensive setups. Here is a tip to save a ton of divines. You don't buy 4 socket gems for a divine. You can easily buy the uncut gems, apply lesser jewelers, and then corrupt them for 4. My build here costed me around 2 divines in total, one for the weapon and the other for the rest of the items, which is a few exalts. The unique ring is worth a divine, but I dropped this during the first week of the early access. This helps if your cold damage is not enough to freeze packs of monsters in one hit. Now, these are the weapons I used to level this character. By the time you get to maps, you want to make sure you have separate cold and fire damage in your weapon, or your ring, so that you can chill and ignite as well. You can also use an expert crackling quarterstaff, which has tons of base lightning damage in it. You don't need physical damage as only 80% of it gets converted to lightning. For your suffixes, if you have enough currency, you look for extra crit chance, attack speed, and crit damage bonus. Note that the plus crit multi is additive to your base value. We are heavily reliant on crits with a near 50% chance when we get power charges. Hence the soul core of Takaba is the best choice for the sockets. For the rest of the gear, you want to get as much evasion and energy shield as possible. This is the bare bone of our basic defense. Since we are taking Lead Me Through Grace, we don't need any spirit in our setup. You can get much more than what I'm using if you spend more currency. If you noticed, I have tons of mana in my gear, which is something I did not ask for. But this is why I don't have any issues with mana sustain, because with more extra mana, you get lots of mana regeneration. Then you look for resistance in your gear, movement speed in your boots, and flat elemental damage in your ring and gloves. If you can afford Hand of Wisdom, this would be the best choice for gloves. Even if you are not stat stacking, this item is extremely powerful at the moment. Finally, make sure to anoint the amulet, as I mentioned earlier, for that extra charm slot. You can get a ton of evasion and energy shield here if you spend more currency. Rarity is optional. The jewels I'm using are completely trash and are not even worth showing. Ideally, you want stats like increased ES and evasion, increased elemental damage, increased critical damage bonus, and gain % of maximum energy shield as additional stun threshold. If you have lots of currency to spend, you can buy an Against the Darkness jewel, which has damage as extra fire or cold. A tip that I saw from high-end builds. This is very expensive, but it adds tons of damage in our setup. The passive tree is straightforward with no weapon swaps, although you could utilize stuff like blink or shield charge. It's up to you if you want to add that. In case if you are struggling with spirit to reserve all your auras, you can grab the nodes around the Herald Reservation. For my final set of points, I would complete this set of nodes for that extra evasion and ES. I will show you the step-by-step leveling I did for my passive tree soon. But the ascendancy is very important to discuss here. The first 2 ascendancies we take Blizzard, followed by Thunder. Once you finish the acts and get your evasion and ES gear ready, you take the Lead Me Through Grace point. Until then, you can use Enfolding Dawn. So you spec out of Thunder into Grace and then grab Sunder. For your final ascendancy point, you can take Rage. This is a massive damage buff for boss fights, but requires you to press a button to activate it. If they nerf Grim Feast, you take Meditate instead. For the best leveling setup, you can use Falling Thunder and Killing Palm along with Frozen Locust and Glacial Cascade. Use them until you get Tempest Flurry and Tempest Bell. I was testing this build with Ice Strike and was fairly disappointed at the defenses early on. Ice Strike is kinda like Flicker Strike, and it requires a good skill. It sometimes misses the target for the worst part. During leveling, I died a lot playing Ice Strike. But clearing with the unique Ring and Herald device is indeed fun. Tempest Flurry, however, is pretty smooth and fast, deals much more damage, and it kills fast. So you die much lesser with Tempest as your main skill. You can also add Hand of Chayula with Freezing Mark and Conductivity early on. So if you found this build enjoyable, make sure to subscribe for more.